Hello, friends, and welcome to the Fight IQ podcast. My name is Jesse Day, and this is a podcast all about combat sports psychology, where I take the wisdom from martial artists throughout history and break it down so we can all apply it to our own lives. And this episode is all about how to lose a fight.
I watched the fourth round of the fight. That was it. Because ultimately that's what, those are the things that I need to accept. I think when you are dealing with something that's that hard, losing a fight, you need to see, don't cloud your judgment with any success you may have had. Deal with the underlying issue. Deal with what ultimately led to the result. And what ultimately led to the result was me doing certain things and the end of the fight, and just truly ignoring all advice from some of the best minds in all the sport. You know, Bob Cook, Javier Mendez, Rosendo Sanchez, and Leandro Vera. Like, it was me not listening that got me beat, and ultimately I deserved to lose that fight, because if I would have continued to win that fight or won that fight, it would not have been the lesson that I need right now in my life.
Daniel Cormier, former UFC heavyweight champion, and he's talking there about his loss of the heavyweight title to Stipe Miocic, and a very profound statement there. And guys, I know I talk a lot about UFC fighters. It seems almost exclusively. I do want to branch out, get in some fighters from one championship, and also maybe some other combat sports as well when I'm looking to examples, but I'm really passionate about mixed martial arts, and I truly believe that sport kind of has just the most elements that represent real martial arts and real combat at its core. So I think the athletes that compete in that sport are something special in some ways compared to other martial art tournaments and different types of combat sports. So with that out of the way, let's break down how DC looked at losing. Now, not only did he lose his title, and then only a few, I believe it was maybe days or weeks later, his father passed away from cancer, and he did that interview in that clip that I played after that happened. So it was kind of a double loss in his life of things that meant a lot to him, but he still really put things into perspective and looked at it through a very practical and a logical sense. Although you could tell he was hurting inside, he looked at it as there's some things I can take from this that I can move forward and then improve. That was almost kind of haunting at the end when he said, I needed this loss. Or that's not exactly what he said. He said he deserved to lose that fight because of the actions and the mistakes that he made, and ultimately it was a lesson that he needed in his life right now, and that was to put things into perspective. He'd lost the title, he'd lost his father, he still had his family with him, and he was looking at it in that way, and that actually led him to decide to continue on with his fighting career. So a very fascinating and a very in-depth take when it comes to losing something. And this will be a theme that will repeat throughout this episode, and all of the great fighters that I use for examples seem to share this sentiment, that there's always something to be found in a loss that can then be improved upon. In Daniel Cormier's case, it was the fact that when he was in there, in fact, in that fight, he lost in the fourth round by stoppage. He got basically knocked out by Miocic. But leading up to then, he was dominating the fight. And at that point, we don't know what happened in his mind, but he admitted it right there that he stopped listening to his coaches, the people that had brought him this far and had brought him to that point in the fight. He just kind of got carried away. We don't actually know what happened, but we do know that he did not listen to his coaches, and he knows that. And he knows that very deeply, so he's not making any excuses. He's realizing, once I get back in there, one of the most important things for my next fight is that I'm listening exactly to what my coaches tell me to do. And I think there's a very real possibility that if he follows through with that, he can go on winning. It's just finding holes in his game every time. I think that's what true champions do in the sport of MMA, and I think that's something that we can all kind of work on is taking any loss or failure or setback as an opportunity to examine ourselves. Maybe there's certain habits that we have that we're getting in the way of our success that we could actually scale back on. Maybe there's a relationship that's there that's interfering with what it is we want to do. Whatever it might be, there's going to be critical decisions and junctures in our life that come from failure and setback that if you take the attitude of Daniel Cormier, you'll be able to learn from and grow.
And one of the things that I learned that effective losers do, the first thing that I learned that effective losers do is they have what I call selective amnesia. Selective amnesia is where you take a situation where you've lost or you failed, and you extract all the useful information you can from that situation and use it to your advantage and learn from it and move forward. Forge forward with that information. All the stuff that's going to hold you back, all those mental blocks, I call mental anchors, they'll just do this to you. This is what they do. Because what it does is it causes paralysis in the decision-making process. And I'm in a position where I need to make a quick decision. In the decision-making process, you have three options. First option, good decision. That's your best option. Next option, believe it or not, your next best option is bad decision. The worst option in the decision-making process is indecision. And anytime that you're in a decision-making process, you cannot have any hesitation.
My God, the power of those words by Rich Franklin. This man used to be a math teacher, I believe it was, in high school, and he did cage fighting on the side in the amateur leagues. He would go fight at bars and stuff like that in these kind of cage matches that would just be very amateur, and he then eventually made his way to the UFC where he became champion there. And he started off that talk that he gave by talking about his loss to Anderson Silva, and that's when he lost the title. And it was in devastating fashion. In the first round, Anderson Silva struck him with some crazy knees from the Muay Thai clinch, knocked Franklin out, and went on to dominate that particular division. However, Franklin talks about what he got from that loss, that he was able to then progress and make himself better as a fighter and a person. And that was kind of the crux of his talk, which of course I'm going to link in the description below if you're listening on a platform that allows that, so you can check out his talk. I really do recommend you watch the entire thing. But whereas Cormier was talking about what he had done to lose the fight in regards to a practical thing, not listening to his corner during the match at a certain point, Franklin was talking about allowing past defeats to cloud your decision-making skills in the current fight that you're in right now. So if you go back to a loss when you get put in a bad position, let's say in a fight, and your mind races back to your last fight where you got put in the exact same position and you lost the fight due to stoppage by ground and pound submission, whatever it might be. So how do you then adapt in that moment to only take the positive information from that previous loss, perhaps realizing the way that you moved to try to get out of that position was not the right way, so you're now able to do it the right way, to refer to your training and what you've been drilling as opposed to your memory of past events. Very interesting. Rich Franklin has always been a very cerebral fighter and cerebral in his approach to the game, and there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned by that fact, because when we face failure, when we then approach the same situation that we were trying to succeed in originally, that previous failure lingers in our mind, doesn't it? I know that it does for me. I think it does for everybody naturally. So to be able to eliminate that lingering thought about the last failure or the last several failures, perhaps this is the 100th time you've tried to do the same thing. You've been getting a little bit better each time, but you failed 99 times. There's just no doubt those 99 times are going to be on your mind. Got 99 problems. And so how do you then turn that off? Turn off the negative side of those 99 failures only, and then retain the positive information that came from the losses in terms of a pattern that perhaps was causing you to fail, or some outside circumstances that were interfering, as I mentioned in the last segment as well, There's a number of ways to dissect and break down failures, and if you can do so without any emotional intensity attached to it, then you have a treasure trove of information at your disposal.
So you seem to be in decent enough spirits right now. I mean, can you put into words, I guess, kind of what the emotions are after, that kind of fight?
Well, it's heartbreaking to lose, but I know I did my best. I put all my effort. I had a lot of submission attempts. I broke her arm, her nose, and well, if maybe that I did a lot of damage too, but if that wasn't enough for the judges, it's okay. My next fight is gonna be very different. I fought against a former champion, from the first from UFC. She was also champion from Invicta. So yeah, I'm fighting against the top females of the world.
So for those who aren't familiar with the sport of mixed martial arts, there are 3 ways to win a bout. One of them is by submission, so latching onto an opponent's limb to the point where it's about to break, wrapping your legs or arms around an opponent's throat until they're going to pass out from loss of oxygen, so they have to tap out. That's a submission. The other way is a knockout or TKO, so either you're just knocked out cold and the fight stopped, or you are not intelligently defending yourself. You're basically taking a bunch of unanswered hard blows to the head on the ground, and in that case the referee will step in and stop it, declaring it a TKO. So I guess 4 ways technically. And then the third way, or fourth way depending on how you look at it, is by decision. So the bout goes to full, whether it's 3 or 5 rounds, and then it goes to the judges' scorecards, where they've hopefully been watching the fight, keeping a tally of which fighter's done more damage, and at the end come to a logical conclusion. The unfortunate thing is that often does not happen, and this fight was one of those instances. That was Alexa Grasso talking about her decision loss to Carla Esparza in Mexico City, and she got robbed basically. I don't know how else to put it to you, but a lot of people were of the same mind, myself definitely. As she mentioned in that interview, she broke Carla Esparza's, she goes, I broke her arm, I broke her nose. And if that wasn't enough for the judges, and she did basically dominate a lot of the fight, do the most damage to her opponent with strikes. The grappling exchanges, Carla did get her down a few times, but nothing much happened there. So overall, when you look at the way the judges scored it, it was not great. So you hear the positive attitude of Grasso, and we're going to end on here for this episode of How to Lose a Fight, because she looked at her loss in such a positive light, although she said, I'm heartbroken, So that's another theme that runs through. You're always heartbroken to take a big loss. There's no way to avoid that emotion, so you might as well just admit it and let it go and get it out of the way, and then focus on what you can do to improve. In this situation, Alexa did everything right. There's not much more she could have done to win that fight. She fought a hard 3 rounds. She implemented a great game plan. She did the most damage. And at the end of the day, in a martial arts competition, my opinion is that that's the fighter who should come out on top on the judges' scorecards. The judges in Mexico City disagreed. And so she was left with a loss on her record, and also the financial loss of not getting a win bonus, although she did get an extra 50 G's for Fight of the Night award, so that probably made up for it, I'm guessing. But nonetheless, it's a loss when she actually won. And we see this happen, especially in the sport of boxing, but that's because a lot of dirty, crooked corruption that goes on with the judges there. I think it's more just ignorance when it comes to mixed martial arts. I don't think the judges are ever involved in fixing fights, although who knows, I have no idea. But it appears to me to be more a matter of ignorance, and it comes up a lot. So there's a lot of fighters that have a loss on their record and that never got their win bonus for a certain night when they absolutely won the fight by anybody who knew anything about combat sports standards. So the judges can rob you of it, which is kind of insane. So there's this adage in combat sports, you got to finish the fight, don't let it go to the judges. But I don't understand that. That's one of the ways you can win the fight. In a system where the judges are actually 100% competent, then going to the judges' scorecards is fine. If you did the best in the fight, if you inflicted the most damage, if you were the most dominant, you would win in the end. But in this case, as in many others, it doesn't happen. So her attitude through that. The other example of Daniel Cormier, he had a concrete reason to point to for his loss, And Rich Franklin in his talk also speaks about concrete reasons he can point to. In Alexa Grasso's case, there's nothing she can point to and say, if I had done that, I would have won the fight, because she did win the fight, essentially. Now, of course, she could go back and say, maybe I could have finished her. Maybe I should have tried to knock her out or submit her in some moment of the fight. But from a tactical standpoint, perhaps there was no reason to put herself in that much risk, because she was dominating. I wouldn't say dominating, but definitely, in my opinion, clearly winning that fight. So, of course, she can always still look back and improve on her game, but the positive she was able to take away was a totally forward-thinking approach. Just like Rich Franklin talked about selective amnesia, it's almost like, you know what, I won that fight, so I'm going to move forward now. I'm still going to learn from she won 2 rounds and lost 1 on most people's scorecards, so she could look at the round she lost and, of course, glean something from that, but basically look at it as a win and move forward. And I think that makes a lot of sense in her position. She doesn't need to make excuses. Basically, she won. So I like her attitude, the positivity that she brought to it, that, hey, let's look forward to the next one. I'm going to bring it even harder next time. And you know what? Even giving credit to her opponent, saying she's a champion. I'm fighting tough girls in this division. And so even giving credit to the woman who beat her at the same time as well. So overall, I think Alexa Grasso had an amazing approach to how to lose a fight. Thank you very much, my friends, for joining me on the Fight IQ podcast, brought to you by High Kick Creative Black Belt Marketing Solutions for the martial arts industry. My name is Jesse Day. You can drop me an email at info@fightiqpodcast.com. Happy to answer any questions you have, listen to your suggestions. I've also got the show set up on Patreon. There's some cool perks there. So if you could check that out, it would really help support the show. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time on Fight IQ.